Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Preet Bharara, and I'm the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York. So here we go again. This has become something of a habit. For the second time in 3 days, we unsealed criminal charges against a sitting member of our state legislature. And based on what is alleged in this latest complaint, it becomes more and more difficult to avoid the sad conclusion that political corruption in New York is indeed rampant, and that a show-me-the-money culture in Albany is alive and well. Today we announced federal corruption charges against one assemblyman and the resignation of another, who himself was previously caught breaking the law, wisely decided to cooperate with the government, and whose efforts, including wearing a wire, helped lead to today's charges. Specifically, today's 36-page criminal complaint alleges that New York State Assemblyman Eric Stevenson accepted over $22,000 in bribes from 4 businessmen in exchange for helping them open and operate adult daycare centers in the Bronx. Not only that, the businessmen gratefully named their center after Assemblyman Stevenson's grandfather. Stevenson allegedly not only helped the businesses obtain necessary permits and recruit clientele, but also, in exchange for cash bribes, introduced actual legislation barring the opening of competing adult daycare centers in the city. In other words, Stevenson tried to enact a statutory moratorium to give his co-defendants a local monopoly. Among other things, it is a fairly neat trick to hatch a scheme that offends core principles of both democracy and capitalism simultaneously. But as alleged, the defendants charged in this case managed to do just that. And before I get to the details, let me acknowledge and thank the folks who got us to this point. I am joined here today by our partner in this extraordinary corruption case, the Bronx District Attorney's Office, represented by District Attorney Robert Johnson. I want to congratulate the dedicated members of the Bronx DA's office who worked so hard on this case, Executive Assistant District Attorney Thomas Leahy, Chief of the Rackets Bureau Stuart Levy, Assistant District Attorney Elizabeth Brandler, who is a Special Assistant U.S. Attorney for purposes of this case, Detective Investigator Vincent Cantarella, and Lieutenant Rocco Delasso. I also want to express my appreciation to the fine career prosecutors who have worked so hard on this matter in what I think is the best public corruption unit anywhere. Assistant U.S. Attorneys Paul Krieger and Brian Jacobs, as well as Brendan McGuire, the chief of that unit. In addition, I want to thank the investigators from my office who worked tirelessly over the past year on this case, Bob Ryan and John Barry. They have been in ways that I can't even describe to you unbelievable in connection with this case, as they always are on every case. I should say at the outset that today's charges are the product of really a remarkable investigation. Sometime back, District Attorney Johnson called me personally and asked my office to join in an investigation in which a member of the New York State Assembly was ready to act as a cooperating witness. That individual is identified in the complaint as Assemblyman 1. He has been charged with felonies in the Bronx County Criminal Court and has now entered a non-prosecution agreement with the Bronx DA's office and with our office. Pursuant to that agreement, he has agreed to resign his elective office and to continue his cooperation. Assemblyman 1's cooperation helped develop the necessary evidence to obtain the cooperation of a second individual who is identified in the complaint as the CW, or cooperating witness. Now let me spend a couple of minutes talking about the allegations in today's 5-count complaint. As I mentioned, since the beginning of 2012, there were 4 businessmen who were trying to open and manage adult daycare centers in the Bronx. An adult daycare center is basically a non-residential facility providing meals, social activities, and general supervision for the elderly or people with disabilities or other medical needs. As alleged, the 4 businessmen wanted something that Assemblyman Stevenson could provide. They wanted help with the department of buildings and with utilities to get their center open more quickly. But ultimately, they also wanted protection against competition, and they wanted legislation that would effectively grant them monopoly status. And as alleged, Assemblyman Stevenson was only too happy to oblige for the right price. If you take a look at the chart to my right, you'll see essentially a graphic depiction of the the quid pro quo. As you see down below, as I described in my remarks, when the four businessmen came to Assemblyman Stevenson, as alleged, and asked for help with the New York City Department of Buildings in order to get a quick certificate of occupancy, what Assemblyman Stevenson essentially said was, show me the money. When they came to him and asked for help with Con Edison, in order to put in a gas line more quickly so they would have heat more quickly, Assemblyman Stevenson basically said, show me the money. When they came to him and asked for legislation that would prevent competition from being able to hurt their profit-making ability when they opened their center in the Bronx, Assemblyman Stevenson basically said, show me the money. And as described in the complaint, as depicted on the chart, the money was shown over and over and over again. On July 25th of 2012, as alleged, one of the businessman defendants gave the cooperating witness $2,000 as a campaign check, which was to go to Eric Stevenson in 2012. On September 7th, 2012, as alleged, two of the businessman defendants gave $10,000 in cash to Assemblyman Stevenson, $1,500 of which he kicked back, pursuant to their agreement, back to the cooperating witness, as depicted on the chart and as described in the complaint. That handoff of cash, by the way, happened, I believe, outside of a restaurant, of a steakhouse in the Bronx. Then on January 11th of 2013, several of the businessman defendants gave the cooperating witness $5,000 to hand over to Stevenson, which $500 of which went back to the cooperating witness, because as detailed in the complaint, the understanding and agreement was that $5,000 would be paid before the bill was ready, or while it was being drafted, and another $5,000 would be paid later. On February 16th, by the way, that transfer of cash, as alleged in the complaint, happened in the cooperating witness's automobile with the assembly. On February 16th of 2013, one of the businessman defendants gave the cooperating witness the agreed upon remaining amount for introducing legislation, $5,000. And that exchange, as described in the complaint, happened in a bathroom in a hotel in Albany. Let me just say a couple more things about the moratorium bill that the four business defendants allegedly paid for, because those allegations, if proven, represent an especially breathtaking bit of corruption, even by Albany standards. Those allegations represent the corrupt sale of an elected representative's core duty, a legislator selling legislation. As the recordings show, Stevenson was brazen and blunt in putting his floor function up for sale. If you look at the chart to my left, you'll see some of what he said in his own words. In one recorded meeting in December, Stevenson tells the CW, quote, "I just need you to tell me what they want. We prepare the bill. You can write down the language, basically what you want." He also says, making the quid pro quo crystal clear, quote, "Are Igor and them putting together a nice little package for me, huh?" There are discussions, as detailed in the complaint also, about how long the moratorium should be, what the draft should say, and many other details. As alleged, further, the defendants did not want to be limited by the moratorium legislation that they were bribing Stevenson to introduce. They wanted to make sure that there was a carve-out from the moratorium so that they themselves, in case they wanted to open more centers, they wanted to make sure that they had that ability. And so they wrote into the bill that they bribed Assemblyman Stevenson to introduce a provision whereby, quote, "adult daycare centers that are open and operating on or before the effective date," close quote, were allowed to expand. So, once again, we have members of the legislature allegedly acting as mercenaries. Once again, we are forced to consider how pervasive corruption is in New York. And once again, we are provided something of an answer from the mouth of a defendant himself. Going back to the chart on my left. Listen to Assemblyman Eric Stevenson in his own words as reported in this case. Quote, "Bottom line, if half of the people up here in Albany was ever caught for what they do, they would probably be in jail, so who are they BSing?" That is Stevenson talking about his own colleagues. And by the way, it was not as if Assemblyman Stevenson was unaware of the consequences of his actions. At times, he seems to have a deep knowledge of the public corruption cases brought by this very office. Again, looking at the chart to my left, he says, look what they gave Miguel Martinez from Washington Heights, 5 years. Look what they gave Efrain Gonzalez, 7 years. He mentions Carl Kruger and several other politicians also, which you'll find in the complaint. On one occasion, as described also, Stevenson says to the cooperating witness, quote, be careful of those things, man, the recorders and all those things. Quote, a lot of guys working to put a lot of people away, man, believe that. Close quote. I think he may have been referring to some of the fine folks who are standing up here with me today. And the events of the past week, I think, raised important questions for everyone. Where does all this serious evidence of pervasive public corruption leave us? Where do we go from here? What are we supposed to do? First, the people of New York should be more than disappointed. They should be angry. When so many of their leaders can be bought for a few $1,000s, they should be angry. When it is more likely for a New York state senator to be arrested by the authorities than to be defeated at the polls, they should be angry. And they should also ask some pointed questions. Given the allegations in today's case, how many other pending bills were born of bribery? And worse, how many past bills were born of bribery? How about items on the budget? How much of the work of the city and state government is tarnished by tawdry graft? Second, while I continue to believe that public corruption in New York is more than a prosecutor's problem, we prosecutors will keep doing our job. And that means being as aggressive and proactive on public corruption as we are on gangs and drugs and organized crime and insider trading and everything else. Because whenever corruption is on the rise, that means democracy is on the decline. And that means that law enforcement will use every aggressive and creative tool at our disposal, wiretaps and confidential informants and undercover agents and stings. And yes, seeking the cooperation of elected officials who can help us investigate and prosecute their own corrupt colleagues where appropriate. After today's case, given the active and long-term cooperation of a sitting assemblyman, if you are a corrupt official in New York, you have to worry that one of your colleagues is working with us, that your misdeeds will be recorded and reported to us, and that it will be that much harder to escape punishment. Third, what has been perhaps most disheartening is the deafening silence of the many individuals who, over the course of this investigation and other investigations, saw something and said nothing. They learned of suspicious and potentially criminal activity being conducted in the halls of the Capitol and elsewhere, and they said nothing. No one made a call, no one blew the whistle, no one sounded the alarm. Rather, too many people looked the other way, and what does it say about the culture and accountability of our system of government when officials are aware of criminal conduct around them and they remain silent? So what I hope happens going forward is that if you are an elected official, or you work for one, or you are in government anywhere and you see corruption or criminality of any stripe, you will call the authorities. Otherwise, we will be back here again and again announcing arrests, as we have in the past, with respect to Senator Carl Kruger, Senator Hiram Montserrat, Senator Nicholas Spano, Senator Vincent Libel, Assemblyman Brian McLaughlin, Assemblyman Anthony Seminario, Councilman Larry Seabrook, Councilwoman Sandy Anavi, and so many others. With that, I call the podium District Attorney Robert Jones.
Good afternoon. Thank you, U.S. Attorney Preet. My remarks this afternoon are going to be very brief. I'm going to echo those of the United States Attorney. I think the message that he just delivered is very clear. Perhaps one of my most important functions is to, as he did, thank the talented team that brought this case to fruition. All of the AUSAs and investigators from the United States Attorney's Office in the Southern District, and the Assistant District Attorneys and investigators from the Bronx District Attorney's Office. These people each and every day commit themselves to justice, and they're to be recognized when they work day in and day out, behind the scenes, to try and bring together something that will make a difference for this state, city, and nation. The citizens of this state place their trust in elected officials. They expect, after electing and placing people in office, governance, fair governance, and efficient deliverance of services. That's what the taxpayers come to expect. That's what the taxpayers deserve. That's what the taxpayers should demand. However, the events of today, as those early in the week, and others that were just listed by the U.S. Attorney, really, I believe, shake the confidence of citizens. We all have to wonder what is going on. But as we wonder, we all must do. We all must try and deal with these issues. The events today show people who are selfish, not just the allegations against the Assembly member, but the 4 business members who wanted to do business, but wanted to do it on a playing field that was slanted in their favor. So it was all downhill for them and uphill for other citizens of our state who are trying to do business in the same arena. With respect to the allegations against the Assemblyman, it's clear that if these allegations are true, it was more important what happened for himself than anything that could have happened for the people in his district. The drafting of the legislation mentioned by the United States Attorney, handing over to lay citizens who had an interest in the legislation the job of drafting a bill that clearly would only favor them, rings out loud and clear that I'm interested in myself, not interested in the people of the state. The message that can come from it is that there is a drumbeat beginning to arise. You all, members of the press, are part of that drumbeat. You are writing about it, you're speaking about it, you're on TV talking about it. The drumbeat is beginning to arise in the citizens who are now taking note and hopefully paying attention who they entrust these very, very significant and responsible offices. And hopefully the drumbeat will be taken up in the halls of Albany, where I think the honest, hardworking members of the legislature and the executive, not only in Albany, but in state houses and town halls and city halls around the state, these hardworking, honest people need to heed that message about saying something. They need to also understand that if they've already done some wrong, they should put themselves in the place of people who cooperate and minimize the punishment that will be done to them and help to clear up the problem statewide. Part of what we see here today is someone who has ignored a message. You know, when I see a complaint like this, or a complaint like the one that was brought earlier in the week, I want to stand up and say bravo to the men and women who brought it. I want to say that we're doing something about it. Logic would say that other members of the legislature have heard and seen what the consequences are if you do wrongdoing. But then sometimes logic is thrown out the window, because the statements which this Assemblyman have made enumerating the sentences that other people in similar situations got and still moving forward to do wrongdoing is really disheartening. He ignored the message, but I want to say that we will not be ignored. We will continue to do this. We will continue to pull at every thread. We will continue to utilize every opportunity. If we catch someone in small wrongdoing, we will talk to them about what they know about others. This is how it works. This is how it goes on day in and day out. This is one of the reasons why we called upon the U.S. Attorney, because I know they know this. I've seen that same roll call. And I knew that I trusted my folks, but I also knew that I trusted in the Southern District of New York, and that together many heads come up with ideas on how to put something in place. And that's what you see here today. I'm grateful for the work that's done, and I'm hopeful that those in office will heed the message henceforth.
Thanks very much. Happy to take your question.
When you talk about those people in Albany who look the other way, who are you referring to, and specifically is the leadership in the Senate and the Assembly here somehow culpable in looking the other way?
I'm not going to point fingers at particular people, but if you just listen to what I described today and what I described Tuesday, the words of defendants that we have charged and how open they are in talking about how widespread and pervasive and rampant corruption is, that alone gives you an idea of how much people are aware that there's money business going on, and they're not doing anything about it. And you also might imagine, in the course of any investigation, where lots of people are talking to lots of folks, and there is a general awareness that criminal activity is afoot, and when your phone doesn't ring, and the FBI doesn't get a phone call, and other people don't get phone calls, that makes you wonder why it is nobody's doing it.
Would you name the other assemblyman and tell us what alleged wrongdoing he was involved in?
I can't because it's not in the complaint. It's my understanding that that will become public this afternoon. It's my understanding that he himself, I think, will be making some kind of a statement this afternoon.
Why did you allow him to stay in office all these months? Couldn't you have taken this down sooner?
You know, every time we bring a case is a difficult balancing question of how long you let an investigation run, because you want to hold people accountable as soon as it's possible to do so. Sometimes it's the case that you can figure out the extent of corruption or financial fraud or of a drug, in connection with a drug case. Sometimes it's the case that you have to allow people to stay in place so you can get the full extent of accountability that I think the people in New York want. And we take that very seriously. We spend a lot of time thinking and deliberating over that. And this was, in our estimation, the best way to go about it.
Were the felonies charged that Assemblyman related to this case as well? Or
No,
was that
they were not related.
So that's not a political charge.
I'm not commenting on what those charges were, but I think that will become public eventually.
You worked for
I was calling that.
The business of lobbying in New York, city and state, has skyrocketed, and I wonder if you think that that exacerbates or adds to this culture of corruption that we see in both the State House and the City Hall.
I don't think I'm competent to comment on that. Obviously, when you have people who are prepared to take bribes, whether or not lobbying is increasing or declining, it depends on who the people are who are engaging in that conduct, and who the people are who are on the receiving end of requests for special treatment. Yeah.
Would you suggest the timing? So this is the second in 3 days. Is that coincidence or any relationship between this and the
No, if you take a look at both, we bring cases when they're ready to be brought, and there are a lot of considerations that go into that, operational and otherwise, and where particular defendants may be, and if they're in a position to be arrested. If you actually look at the complaints, you'll see that two different investigations working with different partners independently of each other, that there was nefarious activity going on or around Valentine's Day in both cases. And so it's not, it's not an odd thing that conduct that's happening in two different cases at around the same time results in criminal charges, again, at around the same time.
What's the maximum penalty of the case?
I don't have that in front of me. I think for most of them it's 20 years, but that's at the end of the press release.
You said that the public should ask how many bills were introduced that are born of corruption, how many laws that actually were passed were born this way, and how many pieces of the state budget are actually born this way. So if I can ask you, from what you've seen, how many laws and pieces of the state budget do you think are somehow related to this kind of activity?
26. I don't know.
Right. No, but
look, I can't quantify a number. What I'm saying is, common sense tells you that based on what was publicly available in the complaint that we have just unsealed, when it was so easy and casual for someone to agree to take money and to do things with respect to legislation and other things, it makes you wonder when you have dozens and dozens of people and you have other people who have been arrested, and you know how the world works, you know that there's a corruption culture problem. It makes you wonder, if you're a thinking citizen, how much other stuff is out there that is a result of chicanery. I think that's a normal question that people should be asking.
But is there a difference between this bill, which apparently didn't have as much political support, versus legislation that has had hearings, that's been negotiated by legislative leaders, and that's been ultimately vetted through some kind of process?
I don't have a comment about how much political support there was. Obviously, we made our arrests shortly after the bill was introduced. It was introduced, I think, just a few weeks ago. So I don't know what the course of that legislation would have been. It was referred to committee. And And so I can't comment on how well it would have done.
The CW, according to the complaint, is what was described as a candidate. For what office was this person running?
You know, I can't remember if this is a complaint.
Yes, it
So
Yeah,
that's
it-
a candidate, but for what office or what was the race?
You run for state assembly? Yeah, I run for state assembly.
Unsuccessful?
Correct.
Your use of the phrase, "show me the money," that's actually a famous quote up in Albany from State Senator Eric Adams. Was your use of that phrase a reference to that quote?
It was a reference to a pretty decent movie from some time ago.
Okay.
But thanks for the addition.
You worked in Washington. You worked for Senator Schumer. Certainly it's no surprise that politicians get money from people who have legislative business before them. How is this different from what you experienced and you saw when you were working in a legislative body?
I didn't see legislators sit in a hotel bathroom in the Capitol, taking hundreds of dollars in an envelope, specifically in exchange for legislation that they had drafted. That's perhaps the chief difference. You know, there's venality and corruption everywhere, I suppose, where there's money involved. People are allowed. We're not saying that there should be no fundraising and the campaigns can't raise money. What we're saying is, when you have as the laws provide, where there's a specific quid pro quo of cash money for official acts, that's unlawful. Yeah.
How long, what happens now to these adult daycare centers? They are currently open, right? Or is one of them open?
I think there's one, and it's open, and you'd have to ask, you know, the people who are running that center.
Is that the one on West Chester or Girard?
I thought it was on Jerome.
Sir, it seems in this case you have the ultimate insider, an elected official himself, involved in this. Perhaps the public should take comfort that with your sting operation, you only snared one other politician. Was there efforts at others, and we should take comfort that there's only one other politician charged?
I'm not going to comment on what other efforts were made, but I will say that the public should not take great comfort.
Can we ask the district attorney just a quick question? And I don't mean to be unfair here, but is there a particular problem? Because if you look at the long list of a lot of these politicians, they are from the Bronx. Is there a particular problem with politics in the Bronx?
Well, I don't know what the problem is elsewhere. I know that people have been caught in the Bronx. And these cases, by their nature, rely on information from somebody who can put you in contact with the wrongdoer. So I don't think you can make any statistical analysis. Every investigative body, every prosecutorial office takes whatever information they get and they go with it. Perhaps some of the elected officials in the Bronx haven't been as bright. I think I've seen that in a number of instances. But you know, the problem is too prevalent in the Bronx. You're right, but I don't know what it is elsewhere.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Perhaps some of the other people in the Bronx. That's a great